The transport shuttle docked at Galactic Union Academy Station with a soft hiss, and Kira Vasquez stepped onto the metal platform with her single bag over her shoulder. She was 17 years old, with dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail and brown eyes that seemed to notice everything around her at once. The station was massive, bigger than any building she had ever seen on Earth, and it was filled with aliens of every shape and size imaginable. Some had scales that shimmered under the artificial lights, while others had multiple limbs or antennae that twitched as she walked past them. Kira kept her face calm and her steps steady as she made her way toward the registration office, but she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her every move. Whispers followed her like shadows. "Is that a human?" One alien asked in a hushed voice that Kira's translator picked up perfectly. "It must be," another replied. This one a tall creature with purple skin and 6 eyes. "I heard they were sending one from the Deathworld." "Deathworld," the first one repeated with a shudder. "I cannot believe they actually live there. Did you know their planet has liquid acid that falls from the sky?" "That is nothing," a third voice joined in. "I heard they eat the flesh of other creatures. Raw, sometimes." Kira kept walking, pretending she did not hear them, though her translator was picking up every single word they said. She had been warned about this before leaving Earth, and the officials at the human embassy had prepared her for the stares and the whispers and the fear. Earth had only made first contact with the Galactic Union 5 years ago, and humans were still a mystery to most species in the galaxy. What they did know about Earth terrified them. The planet was classified as a Class 12 death world, which meant it was considered one of the most hostile environments in the known galaxy. The gravity was crushing by galactic standards. The atmosphere was filled with corrosive oxygen. The weather was violent and unpredictable, and the wildlife was almost entirely designed to kill. And somehow, humans had not only survived there, but had become the dominant species on the entire planet. To most aliens, humans were monsters from a nightmare world, creatures that should not exist but somehow did. Kira found the registration office and completed her paperwork with the help of a nervous insectoid clerk who kept his distance from her the entire time. She received her room assignment, her class schedule, and a small device that would serve as her student identification. "Welcome to Galactic Union Academy," the clerk said in a voice that trembled slightly. "Please try not to, cause any incidents." Kira gave him a small smile that made him flinch. "I will do my best," she said, and she meant it. She was here on a cultural exchange scholarship, the first human ever to attend this academy, and her job was to show the galaxy that humans were not the monsters they imagined. She was supposed to be friendly and calm and peaceful, a good ambassador for her species. It was not going to be easy, but Kira had never been afraid of hard work. She found her room in the student dormitory section and began unpacking her few belongings when she heard loud voices in the corridor outside. "Move aside, worm," a deep voice bellowed, followed by the sound of something crashing to the floor. Kira moved to her door and looked out to see what was happening. A small alien with gray skin and large, frightened eyes was picking up scattered datapads from the floor, while a much larger alien stood over him with all 4 arms crossed. The large alien was at least 7 feet tall, with blue skin that seemed to glow faintly and a face that wore an expression of complete contempt. "Pathetic," the blue alien said, kicking one of the datapads down the corridor. "Your kind should not even be allowed at this academy." The small alien said nothing, just continued gathering his things with shaking hands. "Vorath, enough," another voice said, and Kira saw that the large alien was not alone. 3 others stood behind him, all of them tall and blue-skinned like him, though none quite as large. "You are right," Vorath said with a cruel smile. "This one is not worth my time." He turned to walk away, and that was when his eyes landed on Kira. He stopped. His forearms dropped to his sides, and he tilted his head like a predator examining something new and strange. "What do we have here?" he asked, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. "I do not recognize your species, little one." Kira stood her ground in the doorway and said nothing. "She is the human," one of his companions whispered. "The one from the Deathworld." Morath's eyes widened with surprise for just a moment before his cruel smile returned. "Ah, yes," he said, stopping just a few feet from where Kira stood. "I heard they were sending one of you. I expected something more impressive from a Deathworld species." He looked her up and down, taking in her small frame, her lack of claws or fangs or armor of any kind. "You are tiny," he said with a laugh. "No natural weapons that I can see. How did your kind ever survive on such a dangerous world?" Kira met his eyes without blinking. "We managed," she said simply. Something flickered in Voreth's expression, something that might have been uncertainty, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I am Voreth Keln," he announced, spreading all four arms wide in a gesture of dominance. "My father is Lord Keln of the Dasari High Council. I rule this academy, and everyone here knows their place." He leaned closer to Kira, using his height to tower over her. "I hope you learn yours quickly, Deathworlder," he said in a low voice. "It will make things much easier for you." Kira did not step back, did not look away, did not show any sign of fear or submission. She simply looked up at the 7-foot alien and said, "Thanks for the advice." Then she stepped back into her room and closed the door. Voreth stood in the corridor, his four fists clenching and unclenching, while his companions exchanged nervous glances. No one had ever dismissed him like that before. "She does not know who she is dealing with," one of his companions said. "No," Voreth agreed, his voice cold with anger. "But she will learn." He turned and walked away, already planning how he would break the strange little creature from the Deathworld. Inside her room, Kira sat on her bed and let out a slow breath. She had hoped to avoid trouble at this academy, but it seemed trouble had found her on her very first day. She thought about the large alien and his threats, and she felt something stir deep inside her. Something old and primal that humans had carried with them since the days when they had hunted mammoths across frozen plains. It was the instinct of a predator, the patient awareness of a species that had never been prey. Kira pushed it down and reminded herself why she was here. She was supposed to be peaceful. She was supposed to be friendly. She was supposed to show the galaxy that humans were not monsters. But as she lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling, she could not help but wonder how long that peace would last. The first week at Galactic Union Academy passed slowly for Kira, and each day brought new challenges that tested her patience. The other students avoided her whenever possible, moving to the other side of corridors when she approached and leaving empty seats around her in every classroom. She had grown used to the whispers and the stares, but the loneliness was harder to ignore. She ate her meals alone in the corner of the dining hall, and she walked to her classes alone through the crowded corridors, and she spent her evenings alone in her small room studying for exams. The only person who seemed willing to speak to her was Professor Yenix, an elderly insectoid instructor who taught galactic history and culture. He was small and fragile-looking, with a shell that had faded to a dull brown with age, and compound eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. "You are handling this well," he told her one day after class when the other students had filed out of the room. "Most would have broken by now." Kira shrugged and gathered her things. "I have dealt with worse," she said, and it was true. Earth was a world that taught its children to endure, to adapt, to survive no matter what the universe threw at them. A few stares and whispers were nothing compared to what humans faced every day on their home planet. Professor Yenix studied her with those ancient compound eyes, and something in his expression made Kira pause. "Be careful, young human," he said in a quiet voice. "Vorath Kaln has been asking about you. He does not like to be ignored, and he does not forgive those who defy him." Kira nodded and thanked him for the warning, though she had already noticed that Vorath had been watching her. She saw him everywhere she went, always with his group of followers, always with that cruel smile on his blue face. He had not approached her since that first day, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Predators were patient, and Vorath clearly considered himself a predator. What he did not understand was that Kira was patient too, and she came from a world where patience was the difference between life and death. The harassment began on her second week at the academy. It started small, with little incidents that might have seemed like accidents to anyone who did not know better. Kira was walking to her morning class when someone bumped into her from behind, sending her datapad flying across the corridor. She turned to see Vorath walking away with his companions, all of them laughing as if they had just heard the funniest joke in the galaxy. Kira picked up her datapad and continued on her way without a word. The next day, she sat down in the dining hall only to find that someone had spilled sticky nutrient gel all over her seat. Her uniform was ruined, and she had to return to her room to change while Vorath and his gang watched from across the hall with smirks on their faces. Kira changed her uniform and went back to her classes without complaint. On the third day, her locker had been broken into and her belongings scattered across the floor. On the fourth day, someone had reprogrammed her door lock, so she was trapped inside her room for an hour. On the fifth day, Vorath cornered her in the corridor outside the library and mocked her in front of a crowd of students. "Look at the mighty Deathworlder," he announced with a booming laugh. "She does nothing. She says nothing. Maybe her species is not so dangerous after all." His companions laughed, and some of the other students joined in, though many of them looked uncomfortable. Kira stood there in the middle of the crowd and let the insults wash over her like rain. She did not react, did not respond, did not give Vorath the satisfaction of seeing her anger. She simply waited until he grew bored and walked away, and then she continued on to the library as if nothing had happened. But Professor Yenix had been watching from a nearby doorway, and what he saw made his old shell shiver with something that might have been fear. He had read the classified files on humans, the reports that were hidden from most species in the Galactic Union. He knew what humans really were beneath their calm and peaceful exterior. They were persistence predators, a species that had evolved to chase prey across endless distances until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. They were endurance hunters, built to outlast anything and everything that tried to stand against them. They had conquered the most dangerous planet in the known galaxy, not through strength or speed or natural weapons, but through sheer relentless determination. And they had a quality that most aliens did not understand, something that humans called patience. To most species, patience meant waiting passively for something to happen. But to humans, patience was a weapon, a tool for survival, a way of gathering information about enemies before striking with deadly precision. Professor Yenix watched Kira walk into the library with her calm expression and her steady steps, and he saw what Vorath and the others could not see. She was not broken. She was not afraid. She was watching and waiting and learning, just like her ancestors had done when they stalked mammoths across frozen wastelands and tracked lions through burning savannas. She was a predator pretending to be prey, and she was letting Vorath believe he was winning. The old professor moved his desk closer to the exit and made sure he knew the fastest route to the security office. He had a feeling he would need it soon. A few days later, Vorath decided that small harassment was not enough. He wanted to see the human bow, wanted to see her admit that she was beneath him, wanted to prove to everyone that even a Deathworlder was no match for a son of the Dasari High Council. He found Kira in a quiet corridor near the observation deck, far from the main areas of the station where most students gathered. He had brought his gang with him, all four of them spreading out to block the exits as he approached her with slow and deliberate steps. "There's nowhere to run, Deathworlder," he said, with a smile that showed too many teeth. "No one to help you. No one to see what happens here." Kira stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression as calm as it had been every other time he had confronted her. "What do you want, Vorith?" she asked in a voice that was almost bored. His smile faded, replaced by a look of cold anger. "I want you to bow," he said, stepping closer until he towered over her like a mountain. "I want you to get on your knees and admit that you are nothing. I want you to show everyone on this station what Deathworlders really are. Weak little creatures who pretend to be monsters." He spread all four arms wide, making himself look even larger and more threatening. "Bow to me, human, now." Kira looked up at him, meeting his eyes without blinking. She did not bow. She did not kneel. She did not show any sign of fear or submission. She just looked at him with those calm brown eyes and said nothing at all. And in that moment, deep in the ancient part of his brain that his species had brought with them from their peaceful homeworld, Vorith felt something he had never felt before. It was a cold whisper of doubt, a tiny voice telling him that something was very wrong. But he ignored it because he was Vorith Kelm, and nothing in the galaxy could stand against him. That was the mistake that would cost him everything. The corridor was silent except for the soft hum of the space station and the sound of Vorith's breathing as he stared down at the small human who refused to obey him. His four fists were clenched at his sides, and his blue skin had darkened with anger. No one defied him like this. No one looked at him without fear. He was the son of Lord Kelm, the most powerful noble in the Desari High Council, and lesser species were supposed to tremble in his presence. But this tiny creature from a death world just stood there with her calm expression and her steady eyes, as if he was nothing more than a mild inconvenience. "I gave you an order," Vorith growled, taking another step toward her. "Do you not understand what will happen if you continue to defy me?" Kira tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. "I understand perfectly," she said in that same calm voice. "You want me to be afraid of you. You want me to bow and beg and make you feel powerful. But I am not going to do that, Vorith." His companions shifted nervously behind him, exchanging glances that were filled with uncertainty. They had never seen anyone speak to Vorith like this, and they were not sure what would happen next. "You dare!" Vorith shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "You are nothing. You are a pathetic little creature from a world that should have killed your species long ago. You have no claws, no armor, no venom. What could you possibly do against me?" He spread all four arms wide, displaying his massive frame and the thick muscles that covered his body. "I could crush you with one hand," he said with a sneer. "I could break every bone in your weak little body without even trying. Do you understand that, human?" Kira did not step back. She did not look away. She simply stood there with her hands at her sides and watched him with those calm brown eyes. "Are you done?" she asked. Something inside Vorith snapped. He had tried intimidation. He had tried threats. He had tried everything he knew to make this creature submit, and nothing had worked. In his species, dominance was established through physical displays of power, through striking down those who defied you until they learned their place. It was the only language he truly understood, and he decided it was time to speak it. His primary right arm swung in a wide arc, moving faster than his species usually moved, driven by rage and wounded pride. The blow struck Kira across the face with enough force to send a Desari flying across the corridor. The sound of impact echoed through the empty hallway like a thunderclap. Kira's head snapped to the side, and she stumbled half a step before catching herself. The corridor fell completely silent. Vorith's companions stared with wide eyes, shocked that he had actually done it. Striking a student was forbidden at the academy, and striking a diplomatic exchange student was even worse. But Vareth did not care about rules or consequences. He was smiling now, a cold and cruel smile of satisfaction. The human had finally learned her place. She would bow now, he was certain of it. She would cry and beg and submit like all the others before her. But Kira did not bow. She did not cry. She did not beg or plead or show any sign of pain at all. Instead, she slowly turned her head back to face him, and Vareth felt his smile freeze on his face. There was blood on her lip where his strike had split the skin, a thin trickle of red that stood out against her pale face. She raised her hand and wiped the blood away with the back of her fingers, then looked at it with an expression that was almost curious. And then she did something that made Vareth's blood run cold. She smiled. It was not a friendly smile, or a nervous smile, or the kind of smile that prey showed when they were trying to appease a predator. It was the smile of something ancient and dangerous, something that had hunted across the savannas of a world where everything was designed to kill. It was the smile of a creature that had just been given permission to stop pretending. You know, Kira said in a voice that was soft and calm and absolutely terrifying. On my world, we have a saying. Vareth tried to step back, but his body would not obey him. His legs felt weak, and his hearts were beating too fast, and every instinct he possessed was screaming at him that something was very, very wrong. We say that you get one free shot, Kira continued, still smiling that predator's smile. One chance to hit us before we hit back. It is kind of a tradition, I guess. We give our enemies a chance to see what they are dealing with. She took a step toward him, and Vareth flinched. He actually flinched, the mighty son of Lord Kelm, recoiling from a creature that barely came up to his chest. It is supposed to be sporting, Kira said. Fair. But honestly, I think it is really just because we like to give people a chance to change their minds. A chance to walk away before things get serious. She stopped, standing just a few feet from him, looking up at him with those calm brown eyes that now held something dark and primal. You just used your free shot, Vareth, she said. And then her voice dropped to a whisper that only he could hear. You should have aimed better. Vareth's entire body was shaking now, and he did not understand why. He was bigger than her. He was stronger than her. He had 4 arms, and she had only 2. He should not be afraid of this tiny creature. But the part of his brain that controlled survival instincts did not care about logic or reason. It only knew that he was standing in front of something that his ancestors had never faced. Something that came from a world that was more nightmare than reality. It knew that he was standing in front of a predator that had evolved to kill things much more dangerous than him. His companions seemed to sense it too, because they were slowly backing away, their faces pale and their eyes wide with terror. Vareth, one of them called out in a trembling voice. Maybe we should go. Maybe we should just leave her alone. But Vareth could not move. He was frozen in place, staring down at the human who was still smiling at him with blood on her lip and death in her eyes. I have been so patient, Kira said, and her voice was almost gentle now. I have been so careful. I came here to show the galaxy that humans are peaceful, that we can be friends, that we are not the monsters everyone thinks we are. She paused, and her smile grew just a little wider. But you just could not leave me alone, could you? You just had to push and push and push until something broke. She cracked her knuckles, a small popping sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent corridor. Well, congratulations, Vareth. You finally broke something. She took another step forward. You broke my patience. And then she moved. What happened next took only 10 seconds, but to everyone watching, it felt like a lifetime. Vareth saw the human move, and his brain tried to process what his eyes were showing him, but it simply could not keep up. One moment she was standing 3 feet away from him with that terrible smile on her face, The next moment she was gone, replaced by a blur of motion that his senses could not track. Humans, he would later learn, had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them at all times. They had developed the ability to produce massive bursts of speed and power in short intervals, a survival mechanism that allowed them to either escape from predators or take them down. They called it the fight or flight response, and it was powered by a chemical called adrenaline that flooded their bodies in moments of danger. Vorath had never experienced anything like it. His species had evolved on a paradise world with low gravity and no natural predators. They were slow compared to humans, their reflexes designed for a peaceful existence where nothing ever attacked without warning. By the time his brain registered that Kira had moved, she was already inside his guard. She was close, so close that his forearms could not swing at her, so close that all his advantages in size and reach meant nothing. Her fist drove into his midsection with a force that should have been impossible for such a small creature. The blow was aimed at the cluster of nerve endings that controlled his respiratory system, what humans would call the solar plexus. Vorath's species had never needed to develop resistance to blunt force trauma, because nothing on their homeworld had ever tried to hit them. Their bodies were optimized for a gentle world with soft impacts and forgiving falls. The human's fist felt like a hammer made of stone. All the air rushed out of Vorath's lungs in a single explosive gasp, and his body folded in half as agony ripped through his core. He tried to swing his upper arms at her, tried to grab her with his lower arms, tried to do anything to push her away. But she was too fast. She grabbed two of his arms before they could reach her, and she twisted them in a direction that arms were not supposed to go. Vorath's bones were hollow, an adaptation for his species' low-gravity homeworld that made them light and agile. They were also fragile. There was a cracking sound, sharp and terrible, and Vorath screamed as pain exploded through both of his right arms. Kira released him and stepped back, then swept her leg against his ankles in a practiced motion that humans had been using to topple larger opponents for thousands of years. Vorath crashed to the floor like a falling tree, 400 pounds of alien flesh slamming against the metal deck with a boom that echoed through the corridor. He tried to get up, tried to push himself off the floor with his remaining good arms, but Kira was already on top of him. She dropped her knee onto his chest, and the weight of it drove what little breath he had left out of his body. To his companions watching from the edges of the corridor, it looked like the human was kneeling on him. But to Vorath, it felt like a mountain had fallen on his chest. Humans were dense, far denser than they looked. They had evolved under crushing gravity that would kill most species in the galaxy, and their bodies had become compact masses of muscle and bone. Vorath could not breathe. He could not move. He could only lie there with broken arms and crushed lungs while the tiny creature from the Kuting, Deathworld, leaned down and whispered in his ear. "I want you to listen very carefully," Kira said, and her voice was calm and even, as if she was discussing the weather rather than pinning a 7-foot alien to the floor. "Because I am only going to say this once." Vorath made a choking sound that might have been an attempt at words. "I have been holding back since I got here," Kira continued. "I have been polite. I have been patient. I have let you and everyone else on this station treat me like dirt because I was trying to make a good impression for my species." She leaned closer, and her voice dropped even lower. "But let me tell you something about my species, Vorath. Let me tell you what I really am." Her eyes were inches from his, and in them he saw something that made his very soul want to flee. "I am from a world where we hunt our apex predators for fun. We track them and chase them and kill them, not because we need to, but because we enjoy it. We have driven species to extinction just because they annoyed us." Vorath whimpered, a sound he had never made before in his entire life. "We run prey to death. Did you know that? We do not have claws or fangs or venom, so we just follow them. We chase them across plains and through forests and over mountains, and we never stop. We never give up. We keep going until they collapse from exhaustion, and then we finish them off. It is called persistence hunting, and it made us the most dangerous predators on our planet. She smiled that terrible predator smile again. And do you want to know the really scary part? We domesticated wolves. You know what wolves are? They are pack hunters, some of the most efficient killers on our world. And we looked at them and thought, these would make good friends. We turned them into pets. We made them love us. She shifted her weight slightly, and Vorath gasped in pain. That is what humans are, Vorath. We are the monsters that other monsters are afraid of. We conquered the deadliest planet in the galaxy, and we did it so thoroughly that we got bored and started looking for new challenges. She stood up slowly, removing her weight from his chest. Vorath sucked in a desperate breath, his whole body shaking with pain and terror. So here is what is going to happen, Kira said, looking down at him with cold eyes. You are going to leave me alone. You are going to leave everyone else on this station alone. And you are going to remember for the rest of your life that I showed you mercy today. She straightened her uniform, smoothing out the wrinkles as if nothing had happened. Because I could have done so much worse. I could have killed you in about 5 different ways before you even hit the floor. But I am here to show the galaxy that humans can be peaceful, so I held back. She turned and began walking away, then paused and looked over her shoulder. Do not make me regret that decision. And then she was gone, walking calmly down the corridor with her footsteps echoing in the silence. Vorath lay on the floor, broken and bleeding and unable to move. His companions stood frozen against the walls, too terrified to help him, too shocked to speak. The whole fight had taken 10 seconds. 10 seconds to destroy everything Vorath had believed about himself and his place in the galaxy. 10 seconds to prove that the quiet human girl was exactly the monster everyone had feared. 10 seconds that none of them would ever forget. The news of what had happened spread through Galactic Union Academy Station faster than light itself. Within an hour, every student and staff member had heard some version of the story. The human had attacked Vorath Kaln without provocation, some said. No, others argued. Vorath had struck her first, and she had defended herself. She had killed him, one rumor claimed. She had barely touched him, another insisted. By the time the station security reviewed the corridor footage, the truth was already drowning in a sea of speculation and fear. Kira was summoned to appear before the Academy Council the next morning, and she walked into the chamber expecting to be expelled. The council was made up of representatives from 12 different species, all of them watching her with expressions that ranged from curiosity to terror. At the center of the long table sat the Academy Director, an ancient creature with silver scales and 6 eyes that seemed to look right through her. Kira Vasquez of Earth, the director said in a voice like grinding stones. You have been accused of assaulting a fellow student and causing serious bodily harm. What do you have to say for yourself? Before Kira could respond, a door at the side of the chamber opened and Professor Yannick scuttled in. If I may address the council, he said, his old voice carrying clearly through the room. I have reviewed the security footage of the incident, and I believe it provides important context. The director nodded, and a holographic display flickered to life above the center of the table. The footage showed everything. Vorath cornering Kira, his gang blocking the exits, his threats and demands, and finally, his strike across her face. And then it showed what Kira had done in response. The council watched in stunned silence as the small human dismantled the largest student in the academy in less than 10 seconds. When the footage ended, no one spoke for a long moment. She was clearly attacked first, Professor Yannick said into the silence. Under galactic law, she had every right to defend herself. More importantly, I would like to draw the council's attention to the restraint she showed. Restraint? One of the council members asked in disbelief. She broke 2 of his arms. Yes, Professor Yenix agreed. 2 arms, not 4. She could have broken all of them. She could have done far, far worse. I have studied the classified files on humans, files that most of you have never seen. Their military history alone would give you nightmares for cycles. He turned to look at the council with his compound eyes. This young human was provoked and attacked by a student twice her size, and her response was to disable him using the minimum force necessary. On her world, this would be considered remarkably gentle. She held back. The director leaned forward, those 6 silver eyes studying Kira with intense curiosity. Is this true, human? Were you holding back? Kira met the director's gaze without flinching. Yes, she said simply. I came here to show the galaxy that humans can be peaceful. Killing the son of a High Council member on my first month would not have helped that goal. A murmur ran through the council, and Kira saw something new in their eyes. It was not just fear anymore. There was respect there, and something that might have been admiration. The Kelm family has demanded that the human be expelled and returned to Earth in disgrace, one of the council members said. They are threatening to withdraw their support from the Academy. Let them, another council member responded. I have seen the files that Professor Yenix mentioned. Earth's military forces could destroy our combined fleets in a matter of days. Do we really want to make enemies of a species like this over one spoiled noble's wounded pride? The debate continued for another hour, but in the end, the decision was clear. Kira Vasquez would not be expelled. Varath Kelm had initiated the violence, and Kira had responded with what the council officially declared to be reasonable self-defense. The Kelm family was quietly informed that any retaliation against the human would be considered an act of aggression against a diplomatic representative, with all the consequences that implied. They dropped their complaints within a day. Varath returned to classes 2 weeks later with his arms fully healed by the station's medical technology. He did not speak to Kira. He did not look at her. When she walked down a corridor, he moved to the side and let her pass. The other students noticed, and slowly, their fear of the human began to change into something else. She was approached for the first time by a small alien named Trix, a member of a species that had been bullied by Vorath and his gang for years. Is it true? Trix asked in a nervous voice. Is it true that humans protect their pack? Kira looked down at the small creature with its gray skin and large, frightened eyes, and she remembered seeing it on her first day, picking up scattered datapads while Vorath laughed. Yes, she said with a gentle smile. We protect our pack. Once you are one of us, we never let anyone hurt you. Trix's eyes grew even larger. Could I be in your pack? It asked in a voice that was barely a whisper. Kira knelt down so she was at eye level with the small alien. You already are, she said. Word spread through the station that the human was accepting others under her protection, and within a month, Kira had gathered a group of students who had been targets of bullying for years. She walked the corridors with them, ate meals with them, studied with them, and whenever a bully thought about targeting one of her pack, they remembered what had happened to Vorath and decided to find easier prey. The galaxy had expected monsters when they thought of humans. They had expected creatures of violence and destruction, predators who killed without mercy. They were not wrong. Humans were all of those things. But they were something else too, something that the galaxy had not expected. They were protectors. They were loyal. They were the kind of friends who would fight for you without hesitation and without limit. On the last day of the term, Kira stood on the observation deck and looked out at the stars. Trix stood beside her, no longer nervous, no longer afraid. What do you think will happen now? Trix asked. Now that the galaxy knows what humans really are? Kira smiled, and this time it was not the predator smile that had terrified Vorath. It was a warm smile, full of hope and promise. I think the galaxy is about to learn something important, she said. Humans are dangerous, yes. We are monsters who conquered a world of monsters. But we are also pack animals. We bond with things. We protect the weak and fight for our friends. She put a hand on Trix's small shoulder. The galaxy should be afraid of humans, she said. But not for the reasons they think. They should be afraid because once we decide someone is one of us, we will move stars to keep them safe. Trix smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the academy, felt truly at home. Outside the observation window, the stars stretched on forever. Billions of worlds waiting to learn what humanity truly was. And humanity was ready to show them.